You talked about all of the unfortunate accidents, which of course there was another one there in Seattle last weekend. But your sister had a pretty close call. How jacked up did your dad get, and you for that matter? Because I know that you're always up on the starting line when your sister's running in top alcohol. Was it a little nervy standing there at the starting line watching that tire come apart and the wing come off? And
it was she did a really good job, and everything went how you would hope it would go for something like that to happen. And you never know how it's going to happen when a tire blows. I mean, a number of different things could happen. So we were very fortunate. She was able to stay in her lane. She was able to stay off the wall. Didn't get into contact with the other driver. But it is, a very sickening feeling to see that, because we've seen that before with other cars, and, we've seen horrific outcomes, and you just don't know what's going to happen with these cars. But yeah, my heart and my stomach, they just stopped. And I always thought I was a pretty good person under, stressful situations. I'm pretty calm. I'm not, a crazy person, but it's obviously very different when it's your baby sister, and when you've never, I've seen Robert and Dad on fire and, all kinds of different things a number of times. But it's very different to see your younger sister for the first time in a situation like that. And I just totally came apart. You can ask my husband. Him and my sisters have been making fun of me since that day, because I just totally had a meltdown and was crying, and my husband had to just get a hold of me and go, calm down, look up on the screen, she's out of the car, she's getting her helmet off, she's in one piece, and she's fine. But it's like you just can't, you have flashbacks of so many other moments that we've been through, and you just, I think 5 years ago, I wouldn't have probably been this kind of a mess, but what we've been through, you just assume that the worst is what, when you get there, that's what you're going to see. So good to see her out of the car, and I think I was way more messed up than she was. She seemed totally calm, and she knew what had happened as soon as it happened, and, the safety stuff that we have on this car, when the wing comes off, to have the parachutes automatically deploy, and the parachutes were really what kept the car level and didn't let it get airborne or, over the wall or anything like that. So everything went well, and that's when there are things like this, accidents like this, when we can see that what we're doing is working, that's, one good thing that comes out of it. Obviously, you don't ever want to have an accident occur, but when they do and you see, all right, we're on the right track, well, the new safety devices that we're coming up with are working, that's at least a sigh of relief. But yeah, it was a mess, and it's kind of embarrassing now, because there's a scene in the Step Brothers movie where one of the brothers, the parents announce they're getting divorced, and the brothers blame themselves, and the one brother just is uncontrollable crying, and then he thinks he's going to throw up, and he's hyperventilating, and then he gets sick on the family table at Christmas, and my sisters played that scene for me because they were all saying that's what I looked like down there. So real nice.
Well, I
I
guess,
get picked on for caring.
I guess that maybe that gives you a sense of how your husband at the time felt when you had that accident at Seattle a couple of years ago, and you speak about how the outcome could have been different 5 years ago and the advances in the safety equipment. As hard as you slapped that wall a couple of years ago, if it hadn't been for what happened to Eric, you may not be here.
Yeah, it's really, you do have to look at those moments. And, Dad's accident is a perfect example, because his was equally, if not worse, than Eric's. And yet my dad was able to, come out of it. Obviously, he had injuries, but, it's very ironic that it was, after all these years of racing, my dad's been in a lot of different accidents. There was one year, I think in '92, he was pretty much on fire every single run he made down the track. And it was kind of a funny thing at the time, but to have Eric's, accident happen, and we really pushed and worked with NHRA and worked with Ford and worked, obviously John Meslin led us through that to come up with what can we make better as quick as possible, because cars are continuing to go down the track. And then it was our own boss, my dad was incredibly close with Eric, that it was him that, it really immediately helped out. 6 months to the day of Eric's passing is very ironic, but they say that things happen and you can't see at the time that something good will come from it. But if you look down the road, if you look back, you'll see things, and that was one perfect example. So that is, if anything, it obviously doesn't make things easier. It doesn't make us miss Eric any less, but it makes us feel that we've done something good from his accident. It's not in vain, and I think he'd be happy with us. So, but yeah, it's been a tough few years in the circuit, and yet we make so many runs, and sometimes we have to remind ourselves, look at all the good runs we've made and all the safe runs and all the accidents. Gary Densham had an explosion out here last night, looked very dramatic, and he walked away from it, got right out of the car. And so it is hard sometimes. You focus on every very tough situation, but we have to know that we're doing something right. There are people walking away from these. It's a dangerous sport, and we know that. Everybody knows that. So as long as we're not just ignoring situations and we're working to make them better, then we can keep doing what we're doing.